Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 371. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. CPTSD Foundation provides live, daily, interactive group calls in a safe atmosphere for survivors of complex trauma, equipping them with the skills and information they can use every single day in their healing journey. Learn more about this affordable resource at cptsdfoundation.org. That's cptsdfoundation.org. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE is a complementary modality that focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, please visit www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have back Dr. Robert T. Muller on the podcast. Robert, welcome.
Hello.
All right. So Robert T. Muller trained at Harvard, was on faculty at the University of Massachusetts, and is currently at York University in Toronto. Dr. Muller is a fellow of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation for his work on trauma treatment. His new book is Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up, and his therapy bestseller, Trauma and the Avoidant Client, has been translated widely and won the 2011 ISSTD Award for the year's best written work on trauma. As lead investigator on several multi-site programs to treat interpersonal trauma, Dr. Muller has lectured internationally and has been keynote speaker at mental health conferences in New Zealand and Canada. His online magazine, The Trauma and Mental Health Report, is visited by over 100,000 readers a year. Dr. Muller, welcome again. Share with the listeners, before we dive in here, where you're from and where you're calling from, and then let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm calling from Toronto.
Okay.
I'm a Canadian, a Canuck.
All right, nice. So last time you were here, we talked about your book, which I loved, and this new book, Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up, which I said before we started recording here, I really, really enjoy. And I'm just going to say this at the outset here, and I'm going to invite you to set some context. But what I love about your work, these last two books at least, it is you talk a lot about the process of doing this work for the therapists themselves. It's not just how to treat trauma and the neurobiology of trauma, but in addition to that, there's a lot of weight and heft, which I really appreciate, given to not only the therapist's place, but the relationship. Mm-hmm. So having said that, and we can touch upon that later, give us some context as to what the impetus or the influence or the inspiration was for this book, this new one.
So this particular book, the influence was working with clients and seeing just how much the relationship seemed to just have an impact on our work together. There are a lot of things out there a lot of different books that are focused on technique, and while I do value technique very much, I find that the two people in a room together struggling to talk about the suffering of one of those people and helping that person through it, and one of those individuals has some experience but really doesn't know what they're going to see with this person and doesn't know where we're going to go, and it's a very interpersonal and to some extent intimate process, and I find that the therapy relationship just kept coming up again and again in the work that I was doing. And so I thought, okay, let me write a book focusing very much on this particular thing.
Now, when you first got into this field, was that at Was that there for you, this idea of how much the relationship, I mean, obviously it grew, but when you first starting out, what was your sense of that? What was your sense of, okay, how am I going to work with this person or treat this person or heal or fix or correct this person who has trauma? Talk a little bit about your experience starting out.
Yeah. So no, I didn't have I didn't have such a clear sense that it was really going to be so squarely focused on the relationship as I would kind of get further along in my career. I was very much focusing on learning lots of different, like every technique I could find, and that was, CBT techniques, relaxation techniques. All of those are useful, and I continue to use them, and I continue to find them useful. I'm not talking down regarding those techniques at all. But what I found as time went on was that so much, what I kept going back to were these micro conflicts between the client and myself, where there was this sort of anxiety that the person felt, worried that I was going to abandon her, or the client felt worried that I was judging him, or felt the sense of shame for talking about something that they felt, why am I complaining about having the so-called traumatic experience? Other people have it so much harder than me. I shouldn't be whining about it. I don't deserve to be here. So much kept coming back to their feelings about being in the room with me, and feeling that they deserve to get help or don't deserve to get help, or feeling like I'm gonna end up dropping them eventually when I realize that it was all their fault anyway. So all these projections that people had kept coming up, and I realized that it's not just that we need to kind of deal with these things and get to the real work. That was the real work. I mean, it was, and so then I started kind of going into, okay, what's going on here between us, and what's, and using that as part of the self-discovery process for both myself and the client. And I found that to be so helpful for people. So that's what kind of ended up happening as over the last few years.
So, I mean, if we were to, in a sense, put a magnifying glass on those micro interactions, and more specifically for yourself or that of the therapist, what does that infer? What does that imply when you or the therapist is feeling those things? What comes up, and then how do you work through that?
Right. So the most important thing is to, first of all, notice it, and to have an attitude of looking inside and being aware of the idea that one's own personal feelings in relation to trauma clients really have an impact on what happens. And sometimes it can be very subtle. I mean, there was one client who, this was just last week, said to me, you seem to be so irritated with me last week. I don't understand what was going on with you. And this is what she said to me. You seem to be just angry and annoyed with me. And I thought back to the session from that previous week, and I thought, I didn't feel angry at her. I mean, I really didn't. But then as she was talking, and I said to her, okay, can you describe to me what I looked like? And she said, okay, well, and she moved her body forward and said, you were doing this a lot. You were doing this. And I thought back and I remembered, she's right, I was. And so then I started thinking to myself, I said to her, okay, hang on a second. And I just thought for a second. I said, I actually think you're right. I did get an email. I made the mistake of checking my email between sessions, which is a huge mistake. And I did get an email, and I didn't go into it. In fact, it was something that had to do with something with my university, and it was just an irritating thing. It was a minor thing. But I realized that at the beginning of the session, that was still on my mind, and I wasn't really fully paying attention to her. So she was right in a sense. No, I wasn't angry with her or upset with her, but she was right that I wasn't really paying attention to her. And there was something I was irritated by. It's just that it wasn't her. So I actually had to sort of look inside for a moment. And what I said was, I think you're right. You're right to notice that something was going on for me. In fact, I wasn't, as far as I'm aware, I wasn't at least consciously irritated with you. I was irritated though. And I can absolutely see how you would have sort of seen, but the piece I want to take responsibility for here definitely is to say, I wasn't paying attention to you. And so it would be absolutely conceivable that I would be just not there, not really there for you. And so I brought this in, and she said to me something like, that's the first time anyone's ever actually admitted that they were wrong when I've had an argument with them. And it was really interesting, like this moment between us that actually became a growthful moment. And it was such a small little thing, but it was a sort of micro conflict between us that we were able to, and then kind of, I said to her, like, well, how were you feeling about this during the week? And she said, I actually thought about not coming in next week because I was so irritated with you for being irritated with me. And I said, okay, so what led you to come in? She said, well, I had the sneaking suspicion that maybe you'd be okay with me talking about this with you. But I've had other clients where they didn't have that sneaking suspicion and they don't show up, or they do email me and say to me, whatever. And there are these conflict moments, these micro conflicts. If you can use them, notice them, look inside, notice them, and see them as opportunities in the therapy, that can be golden. It can be such an opportunity for people to see that, yes, you can have conflict. No, it doesn't necessarily mean abandonment or humiliation or judgment or something terrible. It doesn't mean the end of the relationship necessarily. People can actually work through conflicts. That idea, which is so obvious to many people, is not at all obvious to people who have had an interpersonal trauma history, because they've so often felt those rejections and abandonments and feelings of neglect for very real reasons. And so, yeah, it was a very useful moment.
Thanks for sharing that. What I love about that is really, yes, they're micro interactions or arguments or conflicts, as you said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It feels just so much like life in a sense. But what it's calling to me is that it's inviting the therapist to step into the here and now, right? It's inviting the therapist to really appreciate the relationship, the collaboration of the relationship, as opposed to this kind of, the therapist is up here and the client is here, who, the therapist isn't all knowing in a sense. It's inviting that. Talk a little bit about that. I think it's one thing to say, okay, we have to notice these things, but what of those therapists who don't want to do that or don't feel that they can do that? Not everyone's doing that.
Absolutely, I agree. It's not like there are many different ways to do trauma therapy, and I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is what ends up happening if you don't do that is that the conflicts in the relationships and the hurts and the things unsaid end up often interfering with the work. They end up creating a barrier. And so often what I've seen with people who have been through previous trauma therapies that haven't worked out is this feeling of failure. We had this whatever, I thought this, he thought that, or she thought that, and it just didn't end up working out, and I'm a failure is what the person so often feels. And so it ends up representing a real missed opportunity for growth. And so you want to be able to use the therapy relationship because it's such a ripe opportunity to be able to deal with what people who have trauma history struggle with, which is the world of the here and now in interpersonal relationships. And so it gives them by actually trying this out with the therapist and doing it in the here and now, and getting that opportunity, it gives them tools that they can take with them to future relationships. And so that's why I suggest doing this. It's a missed opportunity if you don't. It doesn't mean that People won't, some people will just, this happens all the time. And we don't talk about everything in relationships with our partners, or in our relationships with our children or with our parents. We often don't talk about things, and things just sort of end up being unsaid little micro irritations between two people, and it's not necessarily the end of the world. And you can certainly continue in therapy. Very often, that happens, and that happens in life. But it's a potential missed opportunity. Is how I see it.
Is this way of doing therapy, this particular element of the way of doing therapy, in a sense, is it inviting or asking the therapist to what is it asking of themselves? What is it inviting them to do or to be?
Yeah. It's asking the therapist to both mentalize the client's experience and their own experience. So when I say mentalize, I mean to think about the motivations of the client, which we're often in the habit of doing as therapists. But what about our own motivations? To mentalize or try to think about our own motivations. What was going on for me, especially when we get triggered? See, this is the thing that happens so often in trauma work, is that we end up getting triggered by the material. We end up feeling annoyed at the person who is so dependent on us that they're constantly emailing, rather than sort of stopping and saying, okay, what do I need to do here? What's going on for me that I'm feeling irritated by this person's dependence? What's going on for this person that they're constantly needing to reach out to me? Are they feeling a little bit insecure that somehow that they need to connect every couple hours, or otherwise I'm going to sort of fizzle away? Is there something going on in our relationship that's leading them to feel that they need to constantly touch base with me? Who knows? I mean, I'm not sure. But these are the questions you want to ask. And those become a wonderful opportunity. So it's asking the therapist it's really asking the therapist to look inside and to dig. I was giving this workshop, or giving a workshop yesterday, a brief one, and somebody asked me a little bit about self-revelation. They said to me, well, how much then if this is true, how much do you actually reveal about yourself to clients? So here you were, this person said, she was upset about this, or he was upset about this, and then, here you are looking inside. What do you reveal? And what I say to people around that is, reveal as much as is helpful to the client. So you don't want to necessarily start digging deep and saying, okay, well, I was really pissed off because my wife was really annoying me. We had this argument where she, like, whatever. There's there's only so much information that's necessary for people to know. But what is necessary for people to know is to understand that if they lost you for that session, or if you were not behaving in a way that's normal for you, or you were triggered by something, that in fact you also get triggered is an okay thing for people to know. What we were talking about, I think, made me a little anxious. And so I think I was feeling such and such. And so I think maybe that's what you were picking up on, was some of my anxiety. And so if you reveal that much, kind of an emotional state, people find that very helpful. Oh, okay, all right. So, and it's very real and it's honest. And I think it's kind of on what does the person need to know? It's a little like with our children, although I don't want to say that our clients are like our children, but to some extent there is a parental role that therapy, that therapy provides. And so, kind of what information about you as a therapist does the client need to know, versus what are you doing where you're kind of using the client to work out your stuff? And you don't want to be doing that. You want to be providing the information they need for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what really inspires me about what you're saying is there's a lot of self-trust on the part of, I think, the therapist in the process of whatever may happen, right? There's with what you're saying, there's not this, you're not clutching to an agenda. Of course, we talked about techniques and the obvious benefit of importance of those, but you're not walking necessarily into the room with this plan about what you're going to do. Rather, there's a lot of trust in your own beingness as a therapist and what may unfold. And that can be very daunting for a lot of, especially newer clinicians, and I can speak for myself, when I was there, I was like clutching to my clinical hat, you know. I needed to have that on my head. I needed to prove something, not only to myself, but to the client. So what do you say? I mean, a lot of newer clinicians of all, you know, kinds are listening to this. What do you say to them, Robert, about how to practice this? What do you talked about noticing, but beyond that, what do I do when we get off this? How do I practice this? How do I cultivate this sense?
Yeah. So, well, it is helpful if people have not been in therapy themselves, and if they have, I mean, everybody has something that they would need to and want to work out in therapy. If people haven't been in therapy, for starting out therapists, I really highly recommend it. And that might seem like, in a sense, an obvious kind of thing, but not all therapists have themselves been through therapy. And I found that for me, as a graduate student, and then during my postdoctoral years, that was one of the most useful things. It really kind of allowed me, it kind of freed up some psychological space for me to be able to be a little bit less defensive, a little bit less trying to prove myself. I still, for sure, felt like I was trying to prove myself early in my career, and I would still say I'm still trying to prove myself. I mean, we all are. We all are looking for acknowledgement, and we all want to feel needed and like we're valuable. I think that's just very human. But I think sometimes those needs become kind of overwhelming and then brittle, and we become rigid. And when we're struggling with certain clients, it's in part because something has triggered us, and we don't have the space to be able to kind of just open up and say, okay, how did I, quote, screw up there? And the screw up may not have even been a big screw up. I mean, sometimes we trigger clients by simply being empathic and saying exactly the right thing. I mean, literally, by being a fine therapist and being empathic, that can lead some people to feel really pissed off at, some trauma clients, because that makes them feel like you're trying to manipulate them, or trying to, whatever, or that you're eventually going to abandon them. So why are you being so nice to them now when eventually you're going to hurt them in the end? I mean, so it's not that you're even necessarily doing anything wrong, but to be able to sort of step back and go, okay, hang on, what's going on here? What am I bringing to the table? What's the client bringing to the table? Going through therapy is really helpful in order to sort of free up some space mentally for you to be able to do that. Other than that, I would say, thinking about your own motivations, thinking about your own trauma history. And even if you don't have, trauma history in the typical sort of sense that we talk about trauma, interpersonal trauma, abuse, or something like that, think about the things that have led you to suffer. I mean, that's how I think of trauma. It's like, what has led you to suffer, and what consequences has that had on your relationships? So when you've suffered, how has that led you to act in certain ways that are maybe self-protective, or maybe aggressive to others, or maybe, whatever? How does that sometimes lead you to behave in ways that you're not exactly proud of? Those are things, if you can sort of ask those questions of yourself, then that can help you look inside when you're triggered with a client. How do you know you're triggered with a client? You're doing things that are not typical for you. Your nonverbal behavior is atypical. You're anxious and sitting forward in your chair. You're getting lectury with the person. You're becoming resigned and kind of and bored, and you're not typically bored with clients, or you are angry with your client, but that's not a typical thing for you. So you find your emotions are not in line with how you normally are. Those are signs that you're getting triggered by something. And notice those affective changes. That can really help you. And then think about it after the session. You may not have the presence of mind, and there are times I don't have the presence of mind in the session, and I just mess up, and I'm just there, and I don't even know where I'm elsewhere. Who knows? Mm-hmm. This happens, right? And so afterwards, take some time and ask yourself, what the heck was going on for me there? What was, and sort of stop and just actually take some time and say to yourself, what was going on for me? What was motivating me? What was getting in the way? Seek co-supervision. If you work in trauma, ask a colleague who also works in trauma if you can discuss cases with him or her. So if you don't have someone to seek co-supervision with, find someone. And every week or two, talk about your cases and any of these moments where you found yourself acting in ways that you're not exactly proud of or aren't typical for you, or you just don't know you think you're handling things okay, but you just don't know what to do with this client. It's just not working. Seek a co-supervisor. That's really helpful. I mean, I to this day, I have a group that I meet with, and we, every few weeks we meet and we talk and we discuss cases, and we, if there's a space to be able to say, oh my God, I have no idea what to do with this person. And we just kind of sit down and and then we kind of hash it out. And by the end, we have a working plan, and it's good. It's really helpful. So those are some concrete ideas.
Yeah, no, I think they're great, and I appreciate those. And how, generally speaking, is this idea received with newer clinicians? This idea of noticing what's going on with me and kind of being open and being willing to say, I don't know, and to not have an agenda. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's mixed. It's mixed as you're noticing. I mean, I think it's helpful for people to feel that they have a set of tools and to feel that they have an agenda. And I'm not saying I don't have an agenda. I mean, I certainly work from a trauma-informed perspective. And in the work that I do, I work with people to develop safety strategies early in the treatment. Then we, once they feel safer in the therapy relationship and feel that they have some self-regulation skills, such as deep breathing strategies and other kinds of grounding skills, then we start talking about their traumatic experiences in some detail. So I guess you could see that as kind of a quote agenda, but I don't rigidly adhere to that agenda. So I'm open to the idea that if things come up and, let's say we were going to practice certain kinds of grounding skills that day because the person said, I really need to get better at this. I'm really struggling with this. And then something comes up during the week that relates to something they were triggered by, then I'm open to being flexible. And so that's where, you want to have a certain model you're working with, and whether that's a CBT model or an emotion-focused therapy model or a psychodynamic model, you want to be trauma-informed and be thinking about how do the trauma issues in this client get in the way of them living their lives, and then also be mindful of the relationship. So it's not every session isn't us working conflicts out in the relationship. It's more that, you want to be mindful of the relationship, aware of it. What's going on here? You're talking about something with the person, I don't know, let's say their cousin that's driving them crazy. And that person, their cousin really triggers them. And you're talking about certain trauma related issues, but then the person stops and looks at you and kind of looks away and goes like this, kind of covers their face. And almost as if they're hiding from you. You're mindful of the relationship and you say to them, Jody, I notice you're sort of looking down and away. Your hand is covering your face. What's going on? And Jody says, I hate it when I cry. I mean, I look so ugly and I don't want you to see me. So there's something's going on there in the relationship between you and her. You're seeing her, she sees that you see her, and you want to be mindful of that. Rather than just reassuring her, rather than just doing that, asking her, what's going on here? What's hard about me seeing you cry? What's painful about that for you? And if you sort of unpack that a little bit, it can be so useful. So again, this is not something that necessarily happens every session, but it's you want to be mindful of the relationship. And that's kind of where, in my book, I really want people to pay attention to. Again, within the model that they're working, you can apply this absolutely within a cognitive behavioral therapy model, or within a psychodynamic model, or family systems model. It can be applied within any of those models.
Awesome. I want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Robert T. Muller. His new book is Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up. Dr. Muller, before we kind of close out here and I ask you about any go-to book recommendations, how can people contact you? How can they reach you? It's the best way.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So I give my email address out. And so if you just Google my name, Robert T. Muller, Muller, you'll get a whole bunch of links. My personal psychotherapy site, my site at York University, and my email address is all over the place there. So easy to reach me by email. That's probably the easiest way. And I'm happy to have people ask me questions. I'm not shy about that at all. And I think it's really important. If you've read something and you have follow-up questions, you want to know a little bit about it, and feel free to email me.
Awesome. So we'll have the books linked up again here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. We're talking about Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up, and then Trauma and the Avoidant Client, both of which are, I think, crucial for anyone's trauma library. In terms of other books or something you'd recommend, whether trauma related or not, as we close out here, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I really love James Chu's book, Rebuilding Shattered Lives. It's an oldie. It's from probably about 15 years ago or something like that. But he has a second edition that I think is a little bit newer. But it's great. It's really good. And the piece that we didn't talk about here today that is really nicely covered in that is the theme of dissociation. So when trauma survivors experience dissociation, he does such a nice job of covering that. I really like his work. And he's a great guy, by the way. But his book is terrific. It's very, very well read. Very well written book. Awesome.
I'll have that linked up also. Robert, I want to thank you so much for coming on here. I love this topic, and I think again your book is so incredible, and I'm excited to promote it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
The Foundation for Human Enrichment, DBA Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of Waking the Tiger, who developed somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE professional training at www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. CPTSD Foundation provides peer-led support and adjunctive care in between therapy sessions for survivors of complex trauma. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, survivors come together to give and receive support and validation and feel equipped with the knowledge and skills they can use every single day. Learn more at cptsdfoundation.org. That's cptsdfoundation.org.